Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive, frankly incredible pivot in Indian agriculture. We're looking at what happened after the famous Green Revolution, how an entire nationwide system shifted from, just trying to survive, to building a highly complex, commercialized network of diverse crops.
Let's just jump right into this central question on screen, because it's fascinating, isn't it? Back in the late 50s and 60s, India was facing a severe food crisis. The government was literally forced to import grains just to keep folks fed. So the Green Revolution was the fix for that, a huge push for self-sufficiency in staples like wheat. But what actually happens when a country finally produces enough food to survive? How does that entire economic engine evolve once the immediate crisis is over? Well, that's exactly what we're uncovering today, how hitting that baseline of food security basically unlocked a whole new era of commercial farming.
The economic pivot here is absolutely massive. Look at the contrast. The 1960s Green Revolution was all about sheer volume and survival, literally just pumping out enough food grains so the nation wouldn't starve. But the post-Green Revolution era, the focus completely shifts. It isn't just about survival anymore, it's about commercial growth. It's about high-value products in real economic expansion. The agricultural sector basically realized, hey, we don't have to just be a stagnant survival mechanism. We can actually be a dynamic driver for the broader economy. So what does this shift actually look like on the ground? We call it agricultural diversification. And really, it just means reallocating productive resources. Think about the land, the tractors, the capital, and most importantly, the people, the labor force. Instead of pouring 100% of all that into growing wheat or rice year after year after year, farmers started moving those resources into new, varied activities. So they're substituting one crop for another, or jumping into completely different things like livestock and horticulture. Which brings us to part one, changing the cropping pattern. Let's look at how this physically changed the landscape of the farms. You can literally see this reallocation in action right here. The relative output share of your traditional staples, basic cereals and pulses, actually starts dropping. I mean, they're still important, sure, but their overall dominance shrinks. Why? Because farmers started dedicating way more land and effort to non-food grain and commercial crops. Look at the surge in oilseeds, spices, sugarcane, cotton. This wasn't an accident. It was a highly strategic move toward crops that offered totally different economic opportunities and met new market demands. All right, moving on to part two, the rise of horticulture. Let's unpack this massive expansion. When farmers started looking beyond basic grains, the horticulture sector absolutely exploded. To give you a real sense of scale here, think about the sheer staggering volume of mangoes, bananas, flowers. This diversification literally turned India into the second largest horticulture producer in the entire world, right behind China. So we are not talking about some minor side hustle for the industry. This became a colossal, globally significant pillar of their economy. And keep in mind, this sector isn't just one type of food. It's an incredibly vibrant, diverse mix. We're talking fruit and vegetable crops, obviously, but the sector also pulls in the cultivation of flowers, the harvesting of spices, and these massive plantation crops. This huge variety gave rural areas a brand new way to generate output, and it totally reshaped the daily lives of millions of agricultural workers. But, as you might guess, growth like that doesn't happen without some serious growing pains. Let's look at part three, the challenges of horticulture. Let's walk through this somewhat perilous pipeline, because these systemic issues create a very real crisis for small farmers before their food even hits the market. It all starts at step one, with low crop productivity on small farms. But honestly, the real heartbreak happens in steps 2 and 3. Horticulture crops, your fruits, veggies, flowers, they're highly perishable, right? They need incredibly swift, climate-controlled logistics. But instead, farmers face huge post-harvest losses and transit damages, which are massively compounded by a severe lack of proper storage facilities. And then, looking at step 4, you have incredibly weak links in food processing and a massive disconnect between rural farms and urban markets. Basically, the produce is grown, but the infrastructure to preserve it and actually sell it is fundamentally broken. And because of that broken infrastructure, farmers are forced into what we call distress sales. I mean, just imagine it. You pour your labor, your money, your land into a beautiful, high-value vegetable crop. It grows perfectly, but you have nowhere to safely store it, and you can't transport it to a lucrative urban market before it rots. So you're backed into a corner. You literally have to sell it immediately to whoever happens to be nearby for whatever rock-bottom price they offer, just to avoid total crop rot and walking away with absolutely nothing. The source material paints a pretty visceral picture of this reality. It notes that this lack of storage forces farmers to sell their produce, mainly onions, potatoes, and tomatoes, at absolute throwaway prices in many parts of the country. And remember, these aren't some niche luxury goods. These are the core everyday staples of people's diets. Yet, because of these glaring infrastructural gaps, the very people growing them are frequently absorbing devastating financial losses. However, it is not all doom and gloom. Let's look at part 4, driving high agricultural growth. Even with those infrastructural hurdles, the macro-level shift away from just basic food grains was a tremendous success. As you can see on the timeline, by the 1990s and beyond, this strategic pivot was driving incredibly high agricultural growth. This really took off and dominated in the southern and western regions of India. And what's especially fantastic here is that this diversification finally provided opportunities in rain-fed areas, places that historically struggled with traditional water-heavy cereal crops. Suddenly, they were achieving significant agricultural development. So ultimately, small landholders found some massive benefits here. Beyond just developing those rain-fed areas, agricultural diversification became a huge engine for employment. Growing fruits and veggies or running dairy and poultry operations, that takes a lot of hands. It's labor-intensive, which translates to a lot more jobs for the rural workforce. And most importantly, for the individual farmer, cultivating these high-value products gave them access to regular, quick, and high financial returns compared to traditional seasonal grain farming. It completely revolutionized cash flow for small and marginal farmers, provided, of course, the crop actually makes it to market. Which brings us to the big, lingering question I want to leave you with today. The post-Green Revolution era proved, without a doubt, that Indian agriculture could be a dynamic, diversified, and highly profitable sector. Moving to commercial crops and horticulture created jobs and totally boosted regional economies. But as this boom continues, how on earth will the agricultural industry fix its massive storage and transportation crisis to truly protect the small farmers driving this growth? The potential here is just limitless, but only if the infrastructure can finally catch up to the harvest. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning how the systems around us actually work.